She can be president someday herself. She can be the vice president. She can go on to be a Supreme Court justice. She could be attorney general. I mean, she has enormous capability.
Biden speaking in Iowa Falls, Iowa. A study finds the drug that curbs delusions in Parkinson's patients does the same for people with Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia.
It's a rare case of a study halted early because the benefits seemed clear. The drug targets some of the most troubling symptoms that patients and caregivers face, hallucinations that often lead to anxiety, aggression, and physical and verbal abuse. If regulators agree, the drug could become the first treatment specifically for dementia-related psychosis and the first new medicine for Alzheimer's in nearly 2 decades. Tom Rigotti, Fox News.
Some racially charged remarks lead an NFL team to sideline a broadcaster.
The San Francisco 49ers suspending radio analyst Tim Ryan Wednesday for these remarks made on KNBR regarding Baltimore Ravens quarterback Lamar Jackson.
When his dark skin color, with a dark football, with a dark uniform, you could not see that thing.
Ryan will not broadcast Sunday's game against the New Orleans Saints while serving the suspension. He's been an analyst for the Niners since 2014. Ryan in a statement saying, quote, "I regret my choice of words in trying to describe the conditions of the game. Lamar Jackson is an MVP caliber player, and I respect him greatly. I want to sincerely apologize to him and anyone else I offended," end quote. Matt Napolitano, Fox News.
And the Tennessee Aquarium's using an unusual power source for its Christmas lights, an electric eel named Miguel Watson. I'm Carmen Robertson. This is Fox News.
Knowing that we have choices in medical providers locally and outside of Guam is important and reassuring. This is the reason why Calvo Select Care provides quality health care options to its members. From a wide array of local, primary, and specialty doctors and clinics to a comprehensive hospital network on island and outside of Guam, you can trust Calvo Select Care to be there for you. Federal employees and annuitants enroll today. Call 477-9808 for more information.
Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro brings you island hospitality with a true taste of modern Chamorro cuisine. A bistro look that feels like home. Their menu features local and traditional flavors with a twist. From their famous Caliguan Hapa to fresh ahi poke salad and their award-winning barbecue ribs. Mezcla takes your favorite local dishes and serves them with extra flair that you'll only find at Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Stop by their newest location in the Grand Plaza Hotel in Tumon. For reservations, call 969-2652. Mezcla, a true taste of Guam.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Got that? Yeah. That's the way we start the program every day. It's one of our guiding principles. Constitutional rights as enumerated in the Bill of Rights, not something that we got from the government, something that we've always had as natural rights, something that our founders thought so much of that they put them in the Bill of Rights, which we have a kind of responsibility to secure and protect as much as we can. And that's why I always start the program with the Second Amendment. It's one of the parts of the Bill of Rights that's extremely important. Today I've got something from one of my favorite newspapers, WAPO, or as some people call it, the full name of the paper is the Washington Compost. And if you read some of their copy, Compost is probably quite appropriate. It's an extremely liberal newspaper. They try to... The Post, the WAPO, and the New York Times seem to have a contest to see who can get farther to the left with their zany ideas. So today I have an article from a website called Mises.org, M-I-S-E-S. and it's a website dedicated to Austrian economics. Ludwig von Mises. And if you're not real familiar with Austrian economics, maybe a trip to Dr. Google would be time well spent. Austrian economics is kind of the soul of what I would call the conservative approach to economics. In other words, let the free market, leave the free market alone if you want really good results. That's kind of the von Mises school of economics in one sentence. And they also comment on this website also comments on other leftist silliness. This week is called the Washington Post Double Standard on Immigration and Guns. The Washington Post and double standard? Well, of course. There's one standard for the left and one standard for everybody else. Here's how the article goes. Last week, WAPO's editorial board came out against sanctuary cities. No, not the kind of sanctuary cities that refuse to enforce federal immigration law. The Post's editors have no problem with that. Instead, the Post came out against the efforts of some local governments to oppose state and federal level enforcement on restrictions on gun ownership. The Post didn't go easy on these efforts either. The editorial likened gun owner sanctuary efforts to vigilantism and frontier justice, with the obvious implication being these people are one step away from organizing lynch mobs. Moreover, we're told the movement is, quote, nonsense, fanned by mischief makers with an agenda, and will lead to chaos. Well, maybe I have just been anointed as a member of a new club. Nonsense, fanned by mischief makers with an agenda. I am a mischief maker. And I have an agenda. I stand up against the lunacy of the left. And my agenda is that I'm looking for a government who sees to it is its responsibility to secure and protect the individual rights of his citizens so that we all may live as free, get ready for this now, as free men. Oh, you mean women can't be free too? Well, they can if they want to discard their feminazi ideology. Now, seriously, of course, when you use the word men, there was a time not that long ago when the word men could mean people of both sexes. But since we've expanded the number of sexes now, we have to be far more particular. So if you're going to refer to humankind, even the word human is suspect because the word man is buried inside of it. If you want to refer to a member of humankind, you're much better off using the third person plural pronoun they. Anyhow, I guess I am a member of the mischief makers with an agenda. Recognizing the obvious double standard the Post is proposing for immigrant sanctuaries and gun owner sanctuaries, the authors try to explain it all away. The distinction between the two sanctuaries is basic. Localities that have passed resolutions declaring themselves Second Amendment sanctuary jurisdictions are threatening to ignore laws enacted by elected state legislatures and signed by governors. Immigration-focused sanctuary localities are breaking no law. Rather, they are refusing purely voluntary cooperation in service to federal law enforcement. It's pretty hard to split this hair any finer. The Post's distinction here seems to be that local nullification of federal law is acceptable, but local nullification of state law is not. Of course, whether or not local governments are breaking a law depends on each state's constitution and the nature of, quote, home rule in each state. Indeed, in California, Judge James Crandall, appointed by Democrat Governor Jerry Brown ruled against California's law mandating local enforcement of immigration law. Crandall argued the law was an unconstitutional invasion into the rights of the city. He also said the operation of a police department in his jail is a city affair. For the state to say one size fits all for policing isn't going to fit anybody. This state law was enacted, to use the words of the Post editors, by, quote, duly elected state legislators. Does the Post agree or disagree with the judge's logic? If the Post editors disagree, then on what grounds do they justify support for local governments that ignore state laws mandating compliance with immigration enforcement? If the editors agree with the ruling, then on what grounds do they deny local governments freedom to enforce laws as they wish? Moreover, since the Post is now coming out in favor of state and local indifference toward federal law, will the Post editors be throwing their support behind state-level efforts to nullify federal Obamacare laws or federal gun laws? I want to get back down to the end. This is a pretty long article, and I think you get the drift of it, that the Post is all in favor of what we used to call nullification if it deals with guns, but if it deals with keeping illegal immigrants out of the country. But when it comes to a citizen's right to bear arms, well, that's a little different. So taking it down to the end of the column, if the Post really supported democracy, it would want more of it. It would want more legislative bodies, whether city councils, county commissions, or state legislatures, to decide matters for themselves. And that includes laws covering guns. So, in other words, the Washington Post does what I often rail against. And that is, you start out with a result, and if you like the result, how you got to the result doesn't really matter. I'm one to say that if you don't reach the result in a proper fashion, then you have given rise to the advent of the doctrine of unanticipated consequences. So this idea that state officials don't have to cooperate with federal officials enforcing immigration law is not a new one, and it's pretty popular with the left, who, as we can see, would just do away with borders altogether if that were possible. The more illegal aliens that flood into the leftist states, the higher their population count, the more representatives that we'll have in the House of Representatives, and the more sugar they're going to get from Uncle Sam. So why not? Send them in. And, of course, the illegals are probably going to vote for which party if they ever got to the point where they could vote. Yeah. Anyhow, that's the Second Amendment for today. And from there, we go next to Real Joe Cruz. Are you ready for this?
Sure, I am.
We finished the card, and next we're going to go straight to
Zemiakutny.
Yeah, I know the folks from NBC are probably tuned in every day saying, this is a really good how to do it for us. Maybe Chuck Todd could watch sometimes and kind of sharpen up his show a little bit. But as you know, we look through the Daily News and the Post editorials. I try to see if I can find any blunders in there, grammatical, factual, theoretical, whatever. And at the end, if one of the columns is meritorious, it will receive the coveted blue star. Here, I got a big fat blue pencil today. So I can really inscribe that blue star. And a new feature on Tall Tales is that from time to time we will evaluate the editorials emanating from the alternative media. There is a place on the web called Candid News. They don't own a printing press, but obviously they've got a server, and they put some pretty interesting stuff online, including editorials. So just as Matt Drudge kind of revolutionized printing or publishing in the United States, I think we might see that Candid is kind of revolutionizing publishing in on Guam with their approach to publishing. They're pretty good at digging out the facts and presenting them in a very readable fashion, oftentimes digging a little bit deeper than the regular news media, the 2 TV stations and the 2 newspapers. So today we start out with the daily news, and 2 times in a row, the daily news has come up with local editorials. And let's see, I might even be able to find the other one. I got yesterday's editorial. I must have today's editorial somewhere. I'm going to have to go online to find today's editorial. I didn't bring it along with me. Not to worry, I'll bring it up in just a second here. And I don't know how I did that. I've got yesterday's editorial. Oh, yeah, here it is. I've got today's. My bad. You know, I thought I was wrong about something, but I was actually right. But it still counts for being wrong, doesn't it, Real Joe Cruz?
Not really.
Not really? Okay, all right. So the title of today's editorial is Taxpayers' Burden. Oh, yeah, I'm really glad I got this because, once again, the Daily News is way, way off base. So I'm going to stop, and we're going to call part of this civics, 9th grade civics, because there's some clarifications that need to be made here. And this is called Our View, Taxpayers' Burden. Make parties pay or change primary election. As local lawmakers consider reforms to election laws, they need to look at getting rid of the current primary election model or transitioning to a nonpartisan blanket primary. Senator Jim Moylan's Bill 245 aims to give independent candidates who fulfill all general requirements requested of candidates running for a specific office the right to place their names on the ballot under an independent designation. And I went into this the other day pointing out that just isn't what Jim Moylan's bill does, that it doesn't make it any easier for an independent candidate to get on the general election ballot than it is right now. But the bill was very successful for Jim Moylan because he got some good press out of it, and now he's getting more earned media out of it. But it doesn't do what the editorial says. Going on a little bit, right now a designated independent is required to get a minimum of 20% of the total votes cast. That's an independent party, not an independent candidate. Versus those in the Democrat and Republican parties who are required to attain just 4%, Moylan said, as he was wrong. So right now, an independent candidate has to poll either 4% of the votes cast in a primary or 750 votes, whichever is lesser. But I point this out over and over again. The way the ballot is structured now, if you want to vote for Real Joe Cruz for senator, that means you can't vote for any of the other offices on the ballot because you would spoil your ballot. So you're looking at the senators and you're saying, you know, I'm generally a Democrat, and I'm going to vote for 14 Democrats, but I'm going to vote for the Real Joe Cruz too. Yeah, well, that makes a lot of sense, but it wouldn't work because you would just spoil your ballot. So when you come right down to it, the practicality of the situation is it's doubtful that anyone is going to vote to the polls and feel so strongly about that one independent candidate that's going to be the only vote he casts in the primary.
I promise if they do vote for me, it will be worth it.
Well, you're kind of damning yourself with faint praise there, real Joe Cruz.
And I promise no more earthquakes.
No more earthquakes, no more typhoons.
No more global warming either.
Yeah, once upon a time when I was a candidate for office, I had a stump speech where, the idea is a stump speech. You let the people know how much better things are going to be if you're elected. And one of my stump speeches was, well, if you vote for me, when you go down to renew your license, your driver's license, you're not going to get just a new driver's license. You're going to get a new car. Maybe a Lexus, maybe a Cadillac, I don't know what, but you're going to be driving home in a new car if you vote for me. And these blacktop and concrete roads that you've been driving on up until now, forget it. We're going to pave the streets with gold after I'm elected. Yeah, so So no more typhoons, no more earthquakes. Vote for the real Joe Cruz, right?
Yes, Bob Klitzkie, treasurer.
Yes. Okay. So, in other words, Moylan's bill doesn't change that dynamic at all. It's impossible for an independent candidate to get on the general election ballot because he would have to poll 750 votes, which would mean that 750 people would feel so strongly about that one candidate that they wouldn't vote in any of the other races on that ballot. Okay, Senator Joe San Augustine's bill would, among other things, do what the senator says is common sense. Establish a special election to fill a vacancy in the office of the delegate of the House of Representatives, require potential candidates to present federal court clearance. Now, so much. I guess these guys don't think it's worthwhile to listen to tall tales because I've pointed out that when it comes to the Organic Act officers, the governor, the lieutenant governor, senators, you can't add these requirements that the Organic Act states. The Organic Act says for senator, you got to be 25, 5 years a resident, no felonies or misdemeanors involving moral turpitude. And you can't say it must be 6 feet tall or must live in Jotnia or must have a note from his mother or must present his grandmother's recipe for oatmeal cookies or have a police clearance. You can't do that. So anyhow, I guess the Daily News was really taken in by this piece of junk introduced by San Augustine, Pato, and Tina. And I pointed out that if they have any sense of what their own rule about germaneness requires, this bill should never have even been given a number because it's about 7 bills combined into one. Getting rid of or changing the primary election model is also sensible. The whole purpose of a primary is to reduce the number of Democrats and Republicans for the general election ballot. That makes it a party election. Now, you got to give credit to those folks over at the editorial board of the Daily News when they say that makes the primary election a party election. It shows that they have minds like steel traps. They have cut through the fog here and identified the true essence of a primary election. It's a party election where a party's candidates are chosen. Now we get into the interesting part. Taxpayers shouldn't have to pay to decide which members of the political parties advance to the general election. That should be the political party's responsibility. Therefore, the political parties should have to foot the bill. We've been through this so many times. No, 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 no. If there is not a state-sponsored primary, in other words, if we don't have a primary conducted to Guam law, there will be no primaries. I've pointed this out so many times. We didn't have primary elections on Guam until 1970. The reason that we started in 1970 was it was the first year that we elected a governor. Now, before 1970, each party chose its own candidates. Have you ever heard of the smoke-filled room? The smoke-filled room, in other words, the party bosses get together in a room that is where the only people involved are the party bosses, the bigwigs, the boss tweeds, etc., of a particular party. And the political bosses decide who's going to be on the party ticket. So they have a list of people that they like, and those will be the party's candidates. So in the turn of the last century, the so-called progressives of that era, who have nothing to do with the people that call themselves progressive nowadays, decided that this wasn't a good system, because although they got to choose office holders in a general election, they only got to choose from among people selected by the parties. And they wanted to democratize the procedure, so they came up with the idea of the primary election. In other words, in order to get on the general election under a party ticket, you had to get the right number of votes in a primary election. That's where primary started. It was to take away the power of the political boss. So if we don't have primary elections conducted according to Guam law, we just won't have primary elections. That's all. So the Republican bosses and the Democrat bosses will get together and say, well, let's see, here's 20 names to pick from. Yeah, I like him, I like him, I like her, I like him. No, I don't like him. He's too independent. He won't stick with the party discipline. So I'm going to come back to Zemi Yakotny here in a few minutes, and probably you've decided already that the Daily News is not going to get the Blue Star today. You probably can see the handwriting on that wall.
Connecticut water treatment customers don't keep coming back. They're satisfied the first time. That's right. Connecticut non-electric water treatment systems take care of your water problems, and you won't need to keep calling us for repairs. Join the list of satisfied Connecticut customers who purchased their non-electric water systems years ago and are still enjoying clean, conditioned water without any hassles from timers or circuit boards.
American Water Tech, a passion for improving lives through better water.
Family Finance has been serving the people of Guam since 1959, and they'll continue to be there for you in the years to come. Whether you're looking to get a personal loan for that summer vacation or paying off those long overdue bills, Family Finance has got you covered. Apply for a personal loan from $1,000 up to $3,600 by calling Family Finance in Agutya at 475-4545, Upper Tumon at 647-5626, or in Dededo, 633-4473. Family Finance, serving the people of Guam since 1959.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by American Water Tech, a passion for improving lives through better water.
Now, more Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie. Spitting truth like watermelon seeds at a summer picnic. Call now, 888-TALK, 888-8255.
So whether or not you favor primary elections depends on how devoted you are to the D word, democracy, which is so often misunderstood. Democracy means demo, people-cracy, government by the people. So the more often government officials are chosen in an electoral process, the more democracy you have. Now, the other day I really got after the Gannett editorial when it said that, Trump has destroyed so many elements of our democracy, like the courts and the Federal Reserve Board. Well, even if I agreed with their premise, the courts are not democracy. The courts are the least democratic part of our government, as is the Federal Reserve Board. So if you favor democracy, then you would favor primary elections, because if we don't have primary elections, then we're going to have political bosses in the smoke-filled room determining who the candidates for the two parties are, and in a sense, how much they're going to back those candidates, and who's probably more important, who's not going to be a candidate. Now, I'll give you a little autobiographical here. If we did away with the primary and I decided for some reason to take myself out of mothballs and run for the Senate again, I think the chances that the Republicans would want me on their ticket would be somewhere down around slim and none. Because what the party bosses are looking for, they're not looking for public servants. They're not looking for people who are in it to help the people. They're not looking for people who are they're not looking for people who want to see a clean, non-corrupt, etc. government. They're looking for party discipline. Because the party, like any other organization, puts its own self-preservation ahead of all values. So if you want to do away with the primary election, you've just added one more huge flaw to our electoral system here on Guam. The primary is something to be treasured. And if we didn't have it, there's no way that the parties could be forced to do it or would even want to do it, because they would much prefer, the bigwigs in the parties would much prefer to choose the candidates themselves. So this is one of those, well, it's just common sense that if it's to choose a party's candidates, well, then by God, the parties ought to pay for it. It's just common sense. And, I've pointed out before that your common sense tells you that the earth is flat and that objects that are heavier than air cannot fly, that iron ships will never float. And, if we're going to have primaries, the party should pay for them. What the heck? Why should we help them choose their candidates? So going on, getting rid of or changing the primary election model is also sensible. They go to some of the other stuff in Bill 246 that also is nonsense and say it's as sensible as that. Well, that might be a proposition that I can go along with. Taxpayers shouldn't have to pay to decide which members of the political parties advance to the general election. That should be the political party's responsibility, and I've described how that would happen. Therefore, the political party should have to foot the bill. It cannot be done. You can't say we're going to have a primary election this year, and we're going to bill the Democrats this much and the Republicans this much. If we have it according to law, then it's a public function, and you can't make the parties pay for it. And then there's another alternative, or keep the primary election, but change it from an open primary in which voters can decide to vote for a particular party's candidates to a nonpartisan blanket primary where the top vote getters, regardless of political party, advance to the general election ballot. So California has an open primary. So you could conceivably have Democrat candidates and Republican candidates, and in California especially, the top two vote getters might both be Democrats. So you'd have two Democrats on the general election ballot as opposed to a Democrat and a Republican. Now, if you have some sense of the minority, of the function of political parties, the fact that it's often the party structure that causes radical changes in governments, you might not like the open primary, because if we had an open primary here, it would mean that the strong get stronger to the point that we probably would wind up with only one political party. And we know from experience that a one-party system is not a good system. So I'm not crazy about the open primary either. Keep the primary election, but change it from an open primary in which voters can decide to vote for a particular party's candidates to a nonpartisan blanket primary where the top vote getters, regardless of party, advance to the general election ballot. This would make it more realistic for independent candidates to get elected. Now, that's true. That's very true, because in a blanket primary, you could vote for whomever you wanted. So that's the one part of this editorial that I agree with. Also, having a nonpartisan blanket primary would eliminate the crossover voting problem, which means we still have people who go to the polls to vote that don't understand how a simple ballot works. And we got to make it really easy for these folks to help us choose our elected representatives. In every primary election, thousands of ballots are voided and uncounted because voters choose candidates from different political parties. In a nonpartisan blanket primary, all votes would be counted. It makes sense to switch to a nonpartisan blanket primary or start requiring the local political parties to shoulder the cost of primary elections. Well, it makes sense only in one location on the island. That would be in the editorial boardroom of the Daily News. It does not make any sense here at Tall Tales, which is, after all, the final arbiter of what makes good sense with respect to electoral politics. So I don't know which was worse, when we had editorials that you plucked from Gannett, or when you have editorials like this for which your premise is totally off base and completely lacking in historical knowledge. You know, there's that old saying that's attributed to George Santayana: those who don't learn the lessons of history are doomed to repeat them. So if we went to that, if we got rid of the primary election and we went back to the smoke-filled room, I would predict that in 1 or 2 elections, we would say, man, we really made a mistake. But guess what? We couldn't fix the mistake, because guess who would have to be the ones who fix the mistake? The ones who benefit from it the most. Now, back in 1970, we went to a primary election because we had so many candidates for governor that the parties themselves couldn't reach a consensus. Well, actually, the Democrat Party, the Republicans knew who their candidate was going to be. It was going to be Carlos Camacho, the last appointed governor of Guam. The Democrats had 3 candidates: Ken Arreola, Ricky Berdallo, and Manny Guerrero. And they couldn't get together to decide which one of those 3 should go up against Camacho. So they decided the better way to do it, instead of having a lot of inter-party warfare, was to go to a primary election. So we started in 1970, and we've had them down until now. As far as I'm concerned, we should never do away with the primary election. We should make it possible for an independent candidate to get on the general election. Moylan's bill doesn't do it. There is a way that it can be done, and if I knew that there were anyone who were listening, I'd explain how it could be done. But, you know, our senators are usually not that interested in legislation aimed at solving problems. More interested in resolutions and feel-good legislation like, let's send 100 folks to Honolulu for FestPac. It's for the culture. Oh, really? Oh, how much is it going to cost? Only $400,000. Oh, well, count me in on that one. I'm for that. You can count on my vote on that one. So that's the Daily News editorial. And we go to the Post. Yesterday, the Daily News awarded kudos to the GFA. Today, the Post is awarding kudos to those who fight to keep meth off Guam. I may develop, I'm working on a draft rule here that if an editorial awards kudos to anyone or anything except Tall Tales, they're automatically disqualified from the Blue Star, because these things generally tend to be exercises in virtue signaling or righteousness preening, showing, hey, I'm for these guys. These are good guys, so therefore I must be a good guy too. That certainly was the case with the Daily News yesterday. So here's the Post. At 2:20 a.m. on Wednesday, while many of us were asleep, Guam police officer B.E. Cruz spotted 3 people rummaging through an abandoned car near a retail building in Dededo and subsequently arrested a pregnant woman who allegedly was in possession of meth. According to the prosecution and court documents, the woman subsequently told police she had been taking meth since she was 18. She's 36 now. In addition to expecting her 5th child, the woman told police she has 4 other children at home. She was charged with meth possession. On Tuesday evening, a Saipan man who was transiting through Guam from Houston to Saipan was arrested at the Wonpat International Airport. The AB Wonpat International Airport on Guam. I wonder how many AB Wonpat International Airports there are. See, there's one here, one in Rota, one in Saipan. Is there one in Pagan?
I think so.
Yeah. So this was the AB Wonpat International Airport on Guam. Now, that's when I get my blue pencil out and mark this. You know, don't waste words, you know. Don't waste words. After his carry-on bag yielded about 193 grams of meth, court documents charging this man with importation of illegal drugs state. The man told customs officers he was asked to carry the drug in exchange for $6,000 that was to be paid once he reached Saipan. A little more than a week ago, Guam mixed martial arts fighter who had been gaining recognition for the international matches in Australia and Hawaii was arrested and charged in connection with discovery of 5 pounds of methamphetamine that went through Guam post office from Las Vegas. He has pleaded not guilty and is on release pending his trial. A little more than 2 months ago, the mayor of Jonia, and by the way, we got to remember this, according to Jim Moylan, the mayor of Jonia is innocent until proven guilty. So if we are to think about recalling him, we've got to proceed very, very carefully. A little more than 2 months ago, the mayor of Jonia was indicted and stands accused of taking bribes in exchange for the use of cluster mailboxes for drug dealing, according to court documents. The documents say that the mayor's case was built in part by recording his phone calls with the cooperation of 2 of his former girlfriends. One of them is serving time in prison for selling drugs to military service members. The other is in the process of cutting a deal with the prosecution in another drug case. Well, the mayor of Jonia can sure pick them, huh? And the cases, if the mayor of Jonia ever gets out from under this criminal charge, maybe he could open up one of those Lonely Hearts websites.
Ah, maybe.
Yeah. In the cases involving the pregnant mother, MMA fighter, airline passenger, and mayor, the defendants have yet to go through the full judicial process. Oh, yeah, and are presumed innocent until they are proven otherwise. But what's clear about these cases is the continued destructive flow of methamphetamine into our community and into the bodies and minds of Guamanians. Decades after meth abuses on the island were called an epidemic. But despite the attempts of drug traffickers to put meth in the hands of Guam residents across many sectors of society, we have also seen the continued efforts of our law enforcers to stop meth from circulating on the streets and flowing through points of entry, including the mail and the airport. It's clear from many cases we've seen in local and federal courts on Guam on a daily basis, that meth continues to ruin the lives of those who use it and the lives of their families. And while drug dealers keep trying to push illegal drugs through our defenses, we also have a select group of dedicated law enforcers who do their job relentlessly to try to stop that from happening. We thank our dedicated law enforcers who haven't let up in the war on illegal drugs. We can only hope that the courts and government officials and employees who are responsible for helping recovering addicts will do their part as diligently as the law enforcers. Aren't we presuming a facts, not an evidence here, real Joe Cruz?
Yes, sir.
How do we know that our cops and customs folks are relentlessly trying to stop the drug flow from happening? You know, everything that was listed in this editorial, those are things that we pay these people to do.
Yes, sir.
So do we give kudos to the fireman for putting out a fire?
I don't know about that. Should we?
Well, isn't that why we have a fire department?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it would seem to me that to rate kudos, you got to go a little bit beyond the routine of your ordinary work. And, of course, our efforts to stomp out methamphetamine on the island have been extremely unsuccessful. I don't know if we're going to want to blame the cops and customs officers for that, if we're going to want to blame the politicians, et cetera. And here's one that I can never forget. We had a famous singer come through our airport, Yvonne Elliman. Yeah, who told the customs who the customs officer said, "You'll have to go to the next line, ma'am." And Yvonne Elliman wanted to go through the first line, and she said, "If I can't have your line, I don't want no other line, baby." Anyhow, when Yvonne Elliman did go through the customs line, she was found with methamphetamine in her stuff. She was guilty of importing methamphetamine to Guam. Well, we really socked it to her. We really set an example there. A message came through loud and clear. You know? Well, we let her out to go do a concert down at what's the name of that school in Agate?
Mount Carmel?
Yeah, down at Mount Carmel. So all of the students at Mount Carmel could see what would happen to you if you imported methamphetamine to Guam, how seriously the law would deal with you. So she went down and did her concert, and then she came back and appeared before a judge, and I'll tell you, they really threw the book at her. They said, "You've got to go back to Honolulu, and you've got to do whatever the probation officers in Honolulu tell you to do." How much time did she spend in jail? No. So if we're going to do that, how do we ever expect to send the message that you can't do methamphetamine on Guam and get away with it? Okay, well, let's take a break here. We got about 10 minutes before our big halftime show. Let's take a short break.
GRMC's cardiology department treats most complex heart problems. In our catheterization lab, cardiologists use imaging equipment to treat clogged arteries that can cause heart attacks or heart failure. We perform balloon angioplasty, stenting, and other life-saving cardiac procedures. If you suffer from a heart condition, have your provider refer you to GRMC's cardiology clinic at 645-5500. GRMC, where patients are partners.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
An easily overlooked part of covering our home is what's inside of it. Over time, we buy things we don't want to lose, but don't update our contents coverage. The smart thing to do is get the answers and level up our insurance to make sure we're totally protected.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
So here we are. We've got about 8 more minutes till that big halftime show that you all enjoy so much with the marching bands, the cheerleaders, the pom-pom girls, the synchronized card sections in the grandstand, etc. So I just really don't see, I don't see giving kudos to our law enforcement officers who are out there attempting to catch the meth dealers. Maybe I'm being too hard on them. It is a tough job, and as I mentioned with Yvonne Elliman, sometimes they don't get much help from the court. But let's not be all that lavish with our praise for government officials who are doing what we have hired them to do. So that's the Post editorial for today. And now today, we have another editorial. We're up to 3 editorials today. This one comes from the independent publishing section of our community, Candid News. And this is the Candid News editorial. It's entitled, When Is It Enough? Right now, there is at least one criminal with a gun who shoots people along Route 15 randomly. I'll bet the traffic back up along the back road to Anderson has been lighter the past 2 weeks. There's a child rapist on the loose, too, at least one. And there's the Monumku beater. And we can't forget the dog killer either. The Monumku beater was the guy who went into the barber shop and beat up the 61-year-old lady who was the barber. Meanwhile, the Department of Corrections rallied to get rid of leadership Governor Lou Leon Guerrero refused to recognize as part of the problem. And the Guam National Guard seems to be taking steps towards its own mutiny. The governor, in her 2019 State of the Island speech, said a woman went up to her and said she'd never felt so safe before. I think her speechwriter accidentally edited out the first part of that sentence, which should have begun, I had a dream. I had a dream that I never felt so safe before. In the absence of transparency and data from the Guam Police Department, including mandated publication of internal affairs reports, we are left only to surmise that violent crime has surged this year, based on the reports of violence against women, children, the elderly, and many more that have made it to the news. Then there's the Leon Guerrero administration's distinction of having won the record for most prison escapes in a single year. 4, to be exact. Yeah, and don't forget, we've still got 26 more days in December. So we're up to 4 already. The administration is failing in every way to keep us safe, the primary function of government, and yet the governor globetrots with 2 highly paid police officers at a time. And yet, aside from Speaker Telena Nelson's oversight of DOC, the only agency where public and legislative pressure led to reform in the Leon Guerrero administration, there has been no oversight from the Guam legislature on the major safety and security issues facing the people. A member of the governor's executive staff, police officer Ryan Shimizu, was caught on camera stealing money needed for a little girl's medical procedure. No senator is called an oversight hearing. Police officer Joey Uggan, a known bad cop and former member of the Mandanya Drug Task Force, was caught on camera punching a cuffed man in the gut. No senator has called an oversight hearing. In fact, no one has said anything about the problem of police brutality. What are our leaders yakking about in their daily offering to the cacophony that is Gov Guam? Ambient light for fish and stop signs for the previously illiterate. What about public education? Where's that commitment? That fire from elected officials to build Simon Sanchez High School? This is not to mention the fact that nearly all the other schools are rotting fast and need renovations too. Rather than doing anything of substance to provide learning environments to students, our governor has preferred to prevent needed cash flow to the Department of Education, to take away part of its physical plant that houses its education division, and to meddle in the issue of interscholastic sports. No one is calling for an oversight hearing on these matters. It's like these issues just solve themselves while the senators' heads are trimmed into the sand. Maybe he wants to say rammed into the sand. The governor was able to raise money and commit government resources to a fancy and delightful Christmas display at Skinner Plaza, and at the still vacant government house. Yet when parents asked for some help in affording the cost of school supplies at the start of the school year, Adelup couldn't name one effort that could be of assistance. A 9-year-old Tamuning elementary student was raped by Paul Moffness after he kidnapped her while she was walking along a dark road on her bus to her bus stop in the morning. Even that incident didn't trigger any prioritization of resources toward a school busing system that would yield a better and safer bell schedule for students. No plan from Adelup, no oversight from the legislature. It's like all is peachy keen in Friendland. Last year, then candidate Lulian Guerrero was showering us with campaign promises about universal health care and better care at Guam Memorial. It's now a quarter of the way into her administration, and not one finger has been lifted towards universal coverage. Well, this is quite an editorial, and I'm going to come back to it after the big halftime break. I know you're going to want to stay tuned to listen to this. And remember, I've still got a Blue Star to award.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Differing views from constitutional experts. I'm Carmen Roberts, Fox News. 3 of the 4 legal experts who testified during the impeachment hearings Wednesday say it is clear President Trump's actions regarding Ukraine are impeachable. Harvard Law School professor Noah Feldman.
The president solicited assistance from a foreign government in order to assist his own reelection. That is, he used the power of his office that no one else could possibly have used in order to gain personal advantage for himself, distorting the election. And that's precisely what the framers anticipated.
And the expert brought in by the Republicans, Jonathan Turley from George Washington University, warns about rushing through the process and not letting the courts weigh in on congressional subpoenas for evidence from the White House.
President Trump has gone to Congress, to the courts. He's allowed to do that. We have 3 branches, not 2.
It is up to the House Judiciary Committee to decide what, if any, articles of impeachment to draft against the president. Well, the president was in London during Wednesday's hearings while he attended the NATO summit. He returned Wednesday night after slamming Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau for being two-faced, after it appears that some top leaders were laughing at him and laughing at the president's long press conferences at the summit. An active duty U.S. sailor whose submarine was docked at Pearl Harbor in Honolulu opened fire on 3 civilians Wednesday, killing 2 before taking his own life.
We are mobilizing support services for naval shipyard personnel as well as everyone else who may be affected by this tragic event.
Rear Admiral Rob Chadwick says they don't have a motive, and the shooting comes just days before dignitaries and veterans arrive at the base for the 78th anniversary of the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. America's listening to Fox News.
Rain. It's nature's way of cleansing the earth. Yet by the time that rainwater makes its way to your home, it may not be exactly the same as nature created it. A Connecticut water treatment system can improve the quality of the water you and your family drink and use throughout your home, so you can be sure your water is clear, clean, and fresh, just as nature intended it to be. Connecticut, for refreshing ideas on water.
American Water Tech, a passion for improving lives through better water.
Ever
Ever notice how that one perfect holiday gift is just out of reach? Or how sales on the stuff you want all come at the same time? This season, plan ahead with a holiday loan from First Hawaiian Bank. Now you can afford to be nice without being naughty. For more details, visit FHB.com or any branch to apply. Additional restrictions apply. First Hawaiian Bank, member FDIC, equal housing lender.
The state of Minnesota is suing the nation's leading maker of e-cigarettes.
State Attorney General Keith Ellison says the suit against Juul Labs alleges creation of a public nuisance and violation of state consumer protection laws,
including consumer fraud, deceptive trade practices, unlawful trade practices, and false advertising.
The suit comes weeks after Governor Tim Walz listened to students' concerns about vaping and its health risks. He says Juul will put up a fight, but he guarantees the state will fight back.
You can hire your attorneys. You will have your day in court, but we will bring the righteous justice of the state of Minnesota down on Juul.
The CDC says nationally at least 47 people have died from illnesses related to vaping. Gernal Scott, Fox News.
Tennessee set to execute a blind prisoner. Barring a 11th hour stay, 53-year-old Lee Hall will head to the electric chair on Thursday. A manhunt in Chicago for a man dressed as a cop who robbed a currency exchange store.
It wasn't CPD's finest, but a look-alike who Chicago police say barged into the currency exchange store here in downtown Chicago Monday night, telling a store worker that he had a gun.
So he's wearing identical to the Chicago police shirt. He's wearing a ball cap. I do not see a weapon in the video, but that doesn't mean he's not armed.
Police radio via Broadcastify, the suspect, we're told, got away with $2,400 in euros and British pounds. Police also releasing images of the robber described as black, 6 feet, 180 pounds, and about 40 years old. In Chicago, Jeff Manasso, Fox News.
And former President Jimmy Carter's out of the hospital. He was released Wednesday afternoon after being treated for a urinary tract infection. He's overcome several health challenges in recent years. This is Fox News.
Hey, what's that?
A Subway Big Hot Pastrami?
My Big Hot Pastrami?
No, my Subway Big Hot Pastrami. Get your own.
Get your own Subway Big Hot Pastrami. Tender, juicy beef on freshly baked sunflower crunch bread, topped with pickles and mustard. Finish off your meal with all new seasoned potato wedges, baked to perfection right in the restaurant. Both available for a limited time only. Subway, make it what you want.
Are you ready for some football? The Ray Gibson Show has got your fix every day with the Points NFL Pick'em contest. Get the latest updates as we check out the past week's performance and break down the upcoming action. Get your game on by calling the hotline at 888-TALK or sound off on Facebook Live at thepoint.gu. League members get a chance to win some awesome weekly prizes with a shot for your choice of a new GTA phone. The NFL Pick'em contest is brought to you by Current Guam with special thanks to GTA.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
So here we are back again after that big halftime show that we all enjoy so much. I'm going to finish up the third editorial in today's Zemi Akotny. This one is from Candid News, and it's a little bit on the lengthy side, but the title of it is "When Is It Enough?" And the editorial describes all of the shortfalls of the Leon Guerrero administration and the failure of the legislature to pay any attention to these shortfalls. I'm going to pick up with a hospital. Last year, then candidate Lou Leon Guerrero was showering us with campaign promises about universal health coverage and better care at Guam Memorial Hospital. It's now a quarter of the way into her administration, and not one finger has been lifted towards universal coverage. As a matter of fact, health coverage has become more expensive and less accessible since she's been in office. Even the GovGuam health insurance provider, whom her administration facilitated in contracting, costs us more money. The problems at GMH are so rampant that employees skipped the whole anonymous letter trend and went straight to publishing the hospital's dirty laundry in the newspapers. I mean, for goodness sake, the elevators that carry the gurneys from floor to floor hardly ever work. Lest we forget, this administration failed to prevent the first outbreak of dengue in a half-century. The Department of Public Health and Social Services just informed residents that it won't be testing for the disease at its Daytona laboratory because of a fire happened at its Manilo Central office. What? They're not even making any sense anymore. Yet the very venue to make sense of an open, as you were often incomprehensible and malfunctioning government and oversight hearing is not being provided or even mulled by legislators, except for two, Talina Nelson and Therese Terlahi. One other member, Jim Moylan, who has no oversight authority because he's a member of the minority party, has been asking many, many questions of the administration to no avail. Mr. Moylan has been raising issues regarding the excessive tax burden on the everyday Guamanian, the need for more resources to GPD, quicker hiring at GOC, and a focus on priority matters for residents. The governor has ignored Moylan's pleas, even though he's a sitting senator. The governor and her staff think it's okay to ignore questions from the media and from residents about the financial situation of the government. They believe it is on their terms when information on the information on the disbursement of tax refunds should be released. Members of the governor's fiscal team are coy at best, and when reading from their scripted talking points for sound bites, they reject requests for information to put out every obstacle they can, or put out every obstacle they can to its disclosure. Ms. Leon Guerrero literally has run away from both Canada and Guam Daily Post staff as she shielded public information from reaching the public as though she owns the information. Meanwhile, she and her staff refuse to answer very fundamental questions of conflict of interest. She has, as she governs a treasury tied directly to the bank her family owns and operates. She refuses to answer questions of police brutality and corruption, acting like this very serious problem does not exist. Her agencies refuse to say anything about existing criminal complaints regarding the rape of a Mount Carmel student and an administrative investigation into police officer A.J. Balahaja stemming from allegations of child rape throughout his career in law enforcement. Her office still has not provided answers as to the vetting process that allowed the appointment of gambling lord Connie Jo Brennan Shinohara to be the Seaport's general manager. They still have not explained the governor's about-face on the issue of gambling since expressing her disapproval of Senator Nelson's anti-gambling legislation. The crimes committed by the gambling industry have been reported to proper agencies, and yet nothing, even inspections, are being done. Payroll crimes involving government office executives that may also involve the governor herself have been revealed, and everyone in the political establishment is acting like everything is A-OK. No one in the government, not the Guam Police Department, the Attorney General's office, or the Guam legislature is investigating corruption and white-collar crime. The silence is deafening. It's annoying, and it's so typical of Guam. So, three editorials today. The first one, the Daily News editorial, has a crackpot theory that we ought to require political parties to pay for the primaries. It's a completely crackpot theory. The Post, rather than write a real editorial, engaged in virtue signaling, identifying with law enforcement and the attempts to stop methamphetamine from coming into the island. So if for no other reason, I'm going to award the coveted gold star, blue star, by the process of elimination, if nothing else, to Candid News. It's a hard-headed editorial, a hard-edged editorial that really laid it out. So let's see what that does to the box score here. That makes it Post 155, PDN 55, Candid News 2. So you better watch out, Daily News. Candid News is hot on your trail. Okay, so much for Zemi and Kotny. Now let's see what we've got on the card for today. I've got the first item on the card is the Post versus the Adjutant General. And the subtitle for that item on the card is Privacy versus Literacy. Second on the card, item on the card, the Mayor's Council versus Illiteracy. So as you can see, we're putting a little emphasis on literacy today. The ability to read and write is a fairly important set of skills in 21st century Guam. Then I had this on yesterday's card, but a couple more stories came in on Rory, quote, the settler versus the procurement law. Andre has surfaced again. Andre is one of the muckrakers right in there with Troy Torres, Ken Leon Guerrero, Johnny Rosario. Andrea is right up there as one of those who is on the lookout for things that need to be brought forth. So it's Andre versus Joe San Augustine, Peto, and Tina Turla, as you were, Tina Rose Munya Barnes. Then I've got DOE versus sports, United States versus China, which is something I touched on a little earlier in response to one of our Facebookers' request. And I've got the left versus the Salvation Army, which is kind of a preview for Antonio Gramsci versus y'all. So let's start out with the Post versus the Tag. And guess what? We have this dynamite letter here that has a lot of charges dealing with the National Guard and how things are going in the National Guard. And this letter, kind of lays it out. And you know who the author of the letter is, Real Joe Cruz?
Who, sir?
I don't know either.
It's anonymous.
It's an anonymous letter.
Well, then we should give it all the weight in the world.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. If a person had signed this, I would have probably just crumpled it up and thrown it in the wastebasket.
I agree, sir.
But the fact that it's anonymous gives it so much more credibility. So the Post and the Daily News and the two TV stations need to take a bow. You've given these folks that penned the anonymous letter. It could only be one. It could only be, I was going to say one guy, but it could be only one person, and they know how to get some earned media. They know that by not signing their letter, they've increased its credibility by tenfold. So the title of this story in the Post is Letter Questions Guam Guard Leadership. And as you know, I haven't been shy about questioning the Guam Guard leadership myself. But still, if you are a director and you have to fend off anonymous complaints, it really puts you in an awkward situation. Actually, a no-win situation. But there's something in here that really kind of caught my eye. And this is what it says. This is the second anonymous letter from someone purporting to be a National Guard member. Someone purporting to be a National Guard member, to be circulated recently. The first letter also listed a litany of concerns regarding the leadership of the Guard and the impact on the environment. When asked for a comment, Guam National Guard spokeswoman Major Josephine Bloss noted in response to the first letter that was sent in November, the Guard confirms that we are aware of the identity of the author. So they know who wrote the first anonymous letter. However, Bloss says, we will not confirm the member's name due to privacy. Now, I had to read that sentence several times. So they know the name of the person who wrote the anonymous letter, and then this sentence follows. However, we will not confirm the member's name. Well, nobody's asking you to confirm. There's nothing to confirm because we don't have a name. We will not confirm the member's name due to privacy. What does that mean? It means absolutely nothing. It is 3, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 words on a page that have absolutely no meaning whatsoever. I'm not going to tell you that because of privacy. Privacy what? Now, this is the same Josephine Bloss who, in commenting on 2 guardsmen who had been indicted for criminal sexual conduct, said, we believe in innocent until proven guilty. It's in our Constitution. And it's just finally this last one, they decided that they would start separation proceedings against that guardsman. But if this is the spokesperson for the Guard, and this is how she goes about her job, the Guard confirms that we're aware of the identity of the author. However, we will not confirm the member's name due to privacy. Does she mean his privacy? You're going to protect his privacy? The privacy of someone else in the Guard? You know, the ability to write a easily understood sentence ought to be one of the prerequisites for being a spokesman for the Guard. Anyhow, I'm not going to go into this letter other than the fact that maybe Adjutant General Esther Aggie, maybe you ought to look around for another spokesman because the one you got is not helping you at all. Okay, second item on the card, more illiteracy. We've got the Mayor's Council of Guam versus illiteracy. Junior Mayor Jesse M. Bloss, who is considering resigning from his post, received 2 samples of resignation letters from the Mayor's Council of Guam, council officials said yesterday. Mayor's Council President Melissa Savaras and Vice President Robert Hoffman said Bloss is considering stepping down from his post as junior mayor, and he sought help from the council in drafting a resignation letter. This was communicated through Bloss's attorney, Joseph Rosano, according to Savaras and Hoffman. Rosano could not be reached for comment as of press time. The Mayor's Council has yet to hear back from Bloss's attorney more than a week after sending the sample resignation letters on November 25. It's a straightforward resignation letter, Hoffman said. He said Bloss has the option to use either of the samples or not, or to modify either of them. Wow. They're really giving this guy a lot of options, aren't they? Now, I'll tell you a little bit about writing a letter of resignation. Here is the quick and dirty on writing a letter of resignation. Step number 1, grab a fat crayon and hold it in your dominant hand. That's either your right hand or your left hand. Take a piece of paper, hold the fat crayon to the paper and move the pen, move the crayon so that it says, I quit, and then put your name underneath that. This is how it would look. I quit. But, you know, if Mayor Blas, in addition to his other problems, is so lame that he's unable to even write a letter of resignation without help from the Commissioners' Council, how did he ever get to be the mayor? Do we need to have a literacy test for mayors? It's a straightforward resignation letter, Hoffman said. He said Blas has the option to use either of the samples or not, or modify either of them. Hoffman, who's also the mayor of Senahania, said the draft resignation letters that the council prepared were addressed to the people of Jonia. I think a resignation letter has to be addressed to the governor or perhaps the election commission. Blas has been in federal detention since September 18 after he was indicted on extortion and bribery charges related to illegal drugs. And, of course, that means he has not been in the mayor's office and he has not been functioning as mayor, but he has not been recalled by the legislature because the two senators who have commented on it, one, Pito Sherla, he said, well, before he went forward, he'd have to find out what the consensus of the members was. And the other one, Jim Moylan, said, well, we know that he's innocent until proven guilty, and we've got to move on this very carefully. In the meantime, the folks up in Jonia haven't had a mayor since September 18. Blas has been, as you were, he has some 300 hours of accrued annual leave. So he will continue to be paid annual leave until December 23. After that date, he will be on leave without pay status, said Mayor's Council of Guam Executive Director Angel Sablan. Blas will remain in jail while waiting for his trial, which is initially set to start on December 2, but was moved to February 4. If Blas signs a resignation letter, the Mayor's Council will make the letter public, Hoffman said. The Mayor's Council will also provide a copy of the letter to the governor. The governor and the Mayor's Council will notify the Election Commission if there's a resignation. Jonia resident Frank Heaton, one of the several individuals who wants to run for Jonia mayor, initiated a petition to recall Blas. Heaton needs at least 981 signatures. Hoffman said if Blas steps down, the recall petition process would give way to a special election. If there's a vacancy in the Jonia mayor's post before March 8, a special election is required. Well, there's been a vacancy in the mayor's office of Jonia since September. But, of course, the Election Commission isn't going to move on something like that. Hoffman said there are about 12 Jonia residents who have said they wanted to run for mayor, but only 3 have so far filed for an organization report with the Election Commission, which allows them to start raising and spending campaign funds. So, yeah, you know, the guy wants to resign, but I guess he doesn't know how to write a letter of resignation. So I don't know, maybe, Andrew, if you're listening, could you help the mayor of Jonia draft something that would suffice for a letter of resignation? There once was a mayor named Blas. Okay, yeah, maybe the poet laureate of Tall Tales could be of some assistance here. So he apparently is thinking about resigning, but he can't get that letter of resignation out. So the Commissioner's Council is helping him by drafting 2 letters. So he could use either one or modify them or write his own. And I've offered my own suggestion here as to what it could look like also. Okay, next item on the calendar is Rory the Settler versus the procurement law. And this came up in a Post story. The board of directors at the Port Authority has approved a draft memorandum of understanding with Guam Shipyard, which would allow the latter to perform in-kind services for the port in lieu of paying off its debts to the Port Authority. We're all aware that Guam Shipyard has been in active litigation with the ports for money it's owed to the port over the years, General Manager Rory said at Tuesday's meeting with the board. Instead of having them pay that, we're asking them to do in-kind services to remove 2 gantry cranes and to remove the barge at F6. Respicio said approving the draft MOU would be considered a first step. With the board's approval, he can now ask the port's legal counsel and the Government of Guam Chief Procurement Officer to determine if the draft and the board's approval is all that's needed or if an approval from the legislature or the governor is necessary. Under the MOU, Guam Shipyard is to demolish and dispose of 2 inoperative ship-to-shore container cranes or gantry cranes and to lift, cut, and dispose of the port's partially sunken barge in waters adjacent to F6 Pier. A similar arrangement ended unsuccessfully in October of 2016. Instead, the port issued a procurement on the barge removal. However, the project did not move forward because the scope of the work did not include lifting the barge. Bids also were issued to demolish and remove the cranes, but the winning company canceled. 3 years later, these port assets are now a liability and must be removed immediately. We maintain that the proposal submitted by Guam Shipyard is an innovative solution which does not require any cash outlay, a memo from Respicio to the board stated. But the amount of in-kind work would exceed the debt owed by the port, and so there must be some kind of reconciliation, according to Respicio. The port is also offering the credits the shipyard can levy any future leases with the port. You know, this kind of reminds me of Tom Sawyer. You remember Tom Sawyer, right?
I do.
You remember how remember when Tom's aunt required him to whitewash the fence?
Yes.
Did Tom whitewash the fence?
No.
Who whitewashed the fence?
I forgot.
All of his friends.
Yeah, he got everybody else to do it.
Yeah, he got everybody else to do it, but he bartered with them. You know, he offered one of his friends a brass doorknob if he'd whitewash the fence. And I think he also offered another one of his friends a dead white rat on a string. So I guess the port in the library down there in their library section dealing with negotiation has a copy of Tom Sawyer, Life on the Mississippi. So let's see. Rory said the port is also offering the shipyard credits it can lever against future leases with the port, a brass doorknob, and a dead white rat on a string. The shipyard is amenable to a potential 75% credit, so it would not be dollar for dollar, Respicio said, meaning that Rory has talked with the folks from the shipyard. Otherwise, he wouldn't know that, would he? Okay, and then there's some more information like that. Then there's a story in today's Post. Guam Shipyard owes about $400,000 to the port, according to General Manager Rory Respicio. The port is seeking a memorandum agreement. He explained during a Port Authority meeting on December 3rd that if the parties would not proceed with the MOU, the demolition and disposal projects would have to be opened for bids. Heaven forbid. Disclosing, okay, the cranes to be removed, etc. The board approved the draft MOU on December 3. This is essentially the board telling Respicio that they approve of the direction he's taking. However, before anything can be finalized, Respicio needs to confirm that the draft MOU can be solely approved by the port board, does not require approval from the legislature and the governor, and does not need to be executed in accordance with the Guam procurement law. After that, if everything remains favorable, the issue will come back to the board, according to Respicio. And then there's a story here at Post Guam that the board did approve the memorandum. Okay, so we got the 7th inning stretch coming up here. I'm going to come back to Rory the Settler right after the 7th inning stretch.
Rent, lease. What does Horizon do for you? Here's a clue. Advertising, marketing, screening, inspecting, instructing, leasing and signing, collecting and complying, inquiring and assessing, coordinating, repairing, renewing, enforcing, evicting, moving, cleaning, rekeying, communicating. Do it yourself and you'll find it taxing. We work hard to keep the vacancies low, so at the end of the month, you collect the dough. Proven and trusted. Horizon Properties. We do it all. 777-7792. The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training every morning on The Ray Gibson Show.
We've given 10 tips on ways to move up in 2020, and we're not done. I'm Jerry Roberts, and at 7:20 a.m. on The Ray Gibson Show, 5 more ways to stand out and be noticed.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts. Brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Mescla. Try their featured special for December, Seafood Lau Lau, a medley of salmon, shrimp, scallops, and fresh spinach wrapped in tea leaves, steamed to order, topped with soy butter sauce and your choice of starch. Visit Mescla in Agotnya and now in Tumon at the Grand Plaza Hotel. For reservations, please call 969-2652.
Seventh inning stretch, Wrigley Field, center field bleachers, Wrigley Field, Chicago. Sunny day, great day to be at the ballpark. Peanuts, popcorn, and Cracker Jacks, etc. Perhaps leaving the park with a hat that has a big red C on the front of it for Cubs. So before the seventh inning stretch, I was talking about Rory Respicio and his Tom Sawyer method of negotiating here, and there are a lot of things to talk about here. First of all, let's start out with Rory himself, and I've nicknamed him the Settler, because you remember at his first board meeting, the first time after he'd been appointed the general manager of the port, he informed the board that he had talked with Champ Calvo about settling the YTK case. And the board did not like that at all. Oscar Calvo was ready to fire Rory on the spot. Rhea Mesa didn't take to it either. So Rory had no authorization whatsoever to talk to Champ Calvo about settling that case, and then Rory tried to cover it by saying, well, I just asked him, would you be interested in settlement? But it turned out they'd actually set the time and date and place to sit down and talk it over. Well, the board trimmed Rory's wings on that one pretty good. Same meeting, Rory said he was really concerned about the Port 7. That's the 7 members of or 7 employees of the port that had been fired by the previous administration, whose cases were in various states of resolution before the courts and the Civil Service Commission. And Rory pretty much indicated he didn't think this was right. So he appointed Connie Jo Shinohara to set up a task force to determine whether or not what to do with those adverse actions. And the implication was here, well, maybe we could settle those cases. Same meeting, Rory announced that the port was going to get rid of Mike Phillips, a lawyer who had served them for several years, and hire its own in-house counsel. So this was the very first meeting. So it appears that Rory sees it as his charter to go out and start settlement talks on his own without the board's imprimatur. And that may be the case here because he's able to tell the board what the Guam shipyard's position would be as far as tax credits are concerned. He would only know that if he'd talked to Guam Shipyard. So he's taken it upon himself to put together a draft MOU between Guam Shipyard and the port. We don't know if he had any input from the shipyard on this, but maybe so. And then he says, I want you to approve it so I can show it to council to see if it has to be approved by anybody else or just the board. Well, Joe McDonald is the new counsel for the port who replaced Phillips. One would have thought that Rory could have said, Mr. Counsel, I have this idea as to how to barter for the removal of those 2 cranes in that barge. This is essentially what I'm contemplating. Please tell me, is it legal? Does it violate the procurement law? If the port were to enter into an agreement with Guam Shipyard, would it need legislative approval, the governor's approval? Would Snow White and half the dwarfs have to sign off on it? Isn't that why you got in-house counsel, Rory? So there's something here that just, I can't put my finger on it, but it doesn't sit right. I'm going to draft up this memorandum, and then I'm going to see if it's legal or not. After making such a big fuss about having in-house counsel on the payroll and getting rid of Mike Phillips to save money. It seems like a strange way to go about things. So there's that. That's why I've now referred to Rory as Rory the Settler, the one who wants to go around settling cases. He really had a handle on YTK, because he said we could settle that case now before the Supreme Court decides, and we'd have some leverage, and maybe we'd get a more favorable settlement than having to pay the whole $16 million. And then what happened? The Supreme Court ruled in the port's favor. So Rory almost snatched defeat from the jaws of victory there with his attempts at extra ultra-virus negotiation. Then there's this. We have a procurement law, and the purpose, one of the purposes of our procurement law is to make sure that all businesses get a fair shot at doing business with government, that the government doesn't have its favorites and all of the contracts go to its favorites. This is not good government, and it's not good for commerce. It's anti-competitive, not to mention illegal. So we have a procurement law that says, that has a sealed bidding process, all kinds of protections for the bidders, legal hoops to jump through, a protest mechanism, appeals, judicial appeals, etc. But it looks like Rory has invented a way to get around the procurement process if this MOU thing works. So any business that would want to do business with the government of Guam, or at least with the port, step number 1, owe the port money. So perhaps, you could use port services and figure out some way to not have to pay for the port services in a timely fashion and run up a big bill with the port for the services that they provide. And then instead of ponying up the cash and paying it like everybody else does, come along and say, instead of paying that bill, how about if we do this little job for you here at the port? We'll do the job, we'll barter that job against the money that we owe you, and when it's all over, we'll call it even. Parenthesis, in the process, not have to go through that silly procurement process. So is this the new procurement regime that we might be facing, that businesses now will use their creative talents to figure out ways that they can become indebted to the port so they can get business from the port? I don't know. But this is a strange story. Start out and you've got a cart that needs to be repaired. So instead of hiring somebody to repair your cart, you make a deal with somebody that you've been hauling stuff around in that cart for. And then after you dealt with that, then you put the cart before the horse, because you draft up this MOU maybe in cooperation with the other party, and then you say, well, we've got this. Now that we've got it all here in black and white, is it legal? Rory the Settler. Okay, next I've got Andre versus Pito and Tina. And this goes to Pito and Tina's bill, the one where they're going to raise election fees, $500 for senator, $1,000 for governor, start this slush fund for the election. You know, this bill that is Bill 246, which is it's 17 pages long, and it's not one bill. It's about 10 bills crammed into one bill number, and it should never have been given a bill number if the chairman of rules were doing her job. So Andre takes issue with this bill, and this is what he says. This is a letter to the editor. It's here, folks, and just in time for the holidays. The Voter Suppression Act of 2019 has arrived. Now all of Guam citizens can experience the thrill of being disenfranchised by our government. And he goes on to say, I don't agree with some of the stuff that Andrew says, but I always like the way he expresses himself. And he says, and what do the good people of Guam get with the introduction of Bill 246? Well, the bill aims to move the time voters have to register from 10 days to 21 days before any election. And if weekends are factored in, the actual time citizens will have to register to vote would be prohibited a full 30 days before any election. But wait, there's more. It's conceivable that citizens who forget to register during a primary may be completely disenfranchised because they may have only a few weeks to register and participate in a general election. Andre calls this voter suppression. The patented voter suppression formula favors the convenience of the Election Commission to certify the registration rolls over the importance of citizens to participate in elections. Some might say it would be prudent to help the GEC establish a more efficient way of certifying the voter registration rolls rather than suppress voter participation, but that would go against the spirit of voter suppression. As a bonus to the voters, Bill 246 will also suppress the write-in provision afforded by law to candidates and the people. Guam voters and those seeking to serve the people have a storied history of invoking the write-in provision. From the 1970s to 2018, many notable candidates have opted to utilize the write-in provision, and thousands of voters have trusted their conscience and used this purest form of suffrage to choose who will represent their interests. Unfortunately, Andre, no one has ever been elected as a write-in candidate. Interesting, Guam's party primary elections are paid for with taxpayer dollars. See Demi Ikotny for today. We pay for the party primary, they take our money, then suppress our vote. You may be asking, why don't the political parties pay for the primaries themselves? Well, why should they? Taking the voters' money while suppressing their vote at the same time is hilarious. There are many special provisions featured in Bill 246, but the most exciting feature is the change to electioneering, or the distance candidates and their supporters can solicit votes on Election Day from 100 feet away from the polling site to only 50 feet. I agree with Andrew here. That's, if anything, we should make it longer, 200 feet. Now candidates and their gung-ho supporters can wave signs, yell at the top of their lungs, dance uncontrollably, and full blast music even closer to a polling site. If this feature passes, Guam voters will have the thrill of dancing to the beat of the electric slide while making important decisions about Guam's future. In summary, if you like voter suppression and consolidating power in the hands of a few elites that control the political parties on Guam, then Bill 246 is for you. If not, call senators above and tell them to leave the election laws alone and to throw Bill 246 in the trash can. Well, although I don't agree with everything Andrew says, I certainly agree with his punchline. Throw 246 in the trash can. It's technically poor legislation because it combines so many bills into one number. The substance of the bills is not worth the time of the legislature spending on it. And then, of course, there's the shot that it takes, the obligatory shot that it takes at Mike San Nicolas for no apparent reason. So I would say, yeah, let's throw it in the trash can. Next, I have Joe San Augustine versus Carlo Branch. And this is how that one goes. Senators want to appropriate some $22 million in excess fiscal 2019 revenue, while Governor Leon Guerrero's office says it's meant for deficit reduction, which doesn't require legislative appropriation. The governor's fiscal team in a preliminary report said the government of Guam collected $798,066 million in revenue by the end of fiscal 2019, more than $775,000 million in projected revenue. Appropriations Committee Chair Senator Joe San Augustine and other senators introduced at least 13 bills seeking to appropriate at least $20.48 million in what lawmakers say is unappropriated funds. San Augustine said unappropriated funds can't be spent without legislative approval. Carlo Branch, the governor's policy director, said when the general fund as a cumulative deficit the revenues collected in excess of expenses serve to reduce the deficit in that fund. Deficit reduction does not require an appropriation, Branch said. The cumulative deficit is $83 million. Assuming an audit verifies the $22 million is correct, it would reduce the deficit by that much, but no one knows the exact amount until it's audited, Branch said. The Consolidated Revenue and Expenditure Report, which showed the $22 million excess revenue for 2019, is always a snapshot in time, but isn't the same as audited financials, he said. I'm sure we will reach out to him to come to an understanding, Branch said. San Augustine's committee has set December 10 public hearing on two bills, including one that seeks to appropriate $2.9 million from the unappropriated general fund balance as of the end of fiscal 2019 to the Guam Department of Education for rebuilding Simon Sanchez High School. The committee also received testimony on a bill serving to appropriate $500,000 to the Department of Corrections for hiring prison officers. So the legislature, what, I'm up to the home stretch already, huh? Real Joe Cruz? Okay, let me take a short break and I'll try to finish this up before the end of the program.
Want to grow your business? Start a new venture? Or stay ahead of the competition? You can. With Docomo Pacific Smart Business Solutions tailored to your specific needs and ambitions, you can do it all. Partner with a network with best-in-class network coverage, state-of-the-art communication platforms, and a team dedicated to providing you with premium support. Call 688-2677 to start your journey to success today. Docomo Pacific Business, delivering your future today.
Now here's Bob in the traffic chopper. What's up, Bob?
Traffic's at a standstill right now with a guy standing in the middle of the street holding a sign. Let me zoom in. The sign says, "Free the fence."
Free the fence. And what does that mean, Bob?
Not sure, but the guy's out there smiling and waving in short shorts with a weird-looking little hat. He's got a sign in one hand and what looks like, is it? What? It is. It's a bottle of beer in the other.
Oh, no. That's Ray.
Free the fences in your mind with The Ray Gibson Show. Weekday mornings from 6 to 10 on 93.3 The Point.
Talk to Us with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
the home stretch. Here we are, call to the post. Churchill Downs, Louisville, Kentucky. The home stretch on Tall Tales today. That means I got about 7.5 minutes till the end of the program. And it looks like the real Joe Cruz is trying to put somebody on the line. Is that right, real
There's
Joe?
another Joe on the line.
Another Joe?
Yeah.
You mean the other Joe?
Yeah.
Okay, not you. Not the real Joe Cruz.
No.
Okay. Good afternoon, another Joe.
Hey, Uncle Bob. So I was curious if Mike St. Nicholas has been showing to you signs of leadership, or is he taking the approach of seeing which way the wind blows, as you said before about the legislature? For example, everyone's looking. The big elephant in the room, or gorilla in the room, is the impeachment process. Has Mike St. Nicholas come out with any comments or on any side, or is he taking the safe road and have any opinions about the personally, I'm thinking it's purely political, this impeachment thing, and it's Mason-based. In a way to look at it would be it's like the campaigning starting early, but in a very hostile way towards Trump.
Well, I'm not aware of Michael St. Nicholas speaking on the matter at all. And as far as impeachment is concerned, let me see if I can find that part of the Constitution here. Yeah, this is Article 2, Section 4. The President, Vice President, and all civil officers of the United States shall be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, other crimes and misdemeanors, and a crappy personality.
Exactly. We don't like your personality.
Yeah.
That's enough for us to open this can of worms.
Yeah, so I've been following the impeachment, and I've been following the commentators, some of the liberal commentators, the conservative commentators, and then a guy that was actually out here a couple years ago for our Bar Association annual meeting, a guy named Jonathan Turley, who testified before the committee, was it yesterday or the day before? He testified against the impeachment of Trump. He said, I don't like Trump. I voted for Hillary. I'm not going to vote for him this time. I don't like a lot of the stuff he did. But the way you guys are going about impeachment is really, really bad. And he said, if you proceed the way you're going to make it really difficult for every president that follows this one. And his point is that, if you can rush to an impeachment without sufficient grounds because the guy's got a crappy personality and you don't like him, then every president from now on is going to have to concern himself with that same thing. And it's really going to change the balance of power in Washington. It's going to make a couple of people in the House of Representatives extremely powerful and make the already difficult job of president that much harder.
Isn't it really interpretation then? Because whatever you perceive to be a crappy personality could change from year to year. What about, did anyone ever think Obama had a crappy personality? I mean, it seems to be the exact same scenario months before an election, for a presidential election, and the issue, should you or should you not bring up things that may or may not be harmful to the president's re-election campaign. Well, in this case, the Democrats said, yeah, we should. And in the case of Obama, they said, no, we shouldn't, because, Benghazi would be too inconvenient to be worried about, and, answering questions about emails. The thing that amazes me is the emails go back to, I think, if I remember right, the Benghazi issue. The Hillary Clinton emails were about the Benghazi, what did the Obama administration know and when did they know it before the election? And it was a good enough reason that it should not have an influence on the re-election. So why is it okay now? I'm not sure I understand what is the difference, other than, like you said earlier, he's got a personality that they don't like, and they have the moral superiority to figure that out, and we're not smart enough because we're not constitutional law professors at some Ivy League college, and we don't put a separation enough between church and state because we want to be devout Christians or what have you. So anyway, Cabal, thanks, and hopefully we'll hear something from Sir Nicholas about anything. But anyway, I'll just leave it to you to. I apologize, and you'll have a few minutes to finish what you're going to finish up. So I'll keep listening to your program. Thanks for your time.
It's always a pleasure to talk to you, another Joe. Yeah. So going back to Obama, Obama certainly would not have wanted the House to entertain an impeachment investigation on his Fast and Furious problem, because that would have really kind of destroyed his credibility on gun control, wouldn't it? That we're sending guns down to Mexico that fell into the hands of the cartels. So, the Constitution says shall be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of treason. Well, they haven't even accused Trump of treason. I got to add the word yet, right? Bribery. Well, bribery does not mean political log rolling. I'll give you an example. If we're talking on the local scene, and Senator A says, "I'll vote for your bill if you vote to confirm that nominee," that's not bribery. That's not quid pro quo. It's not illegal. Anyhow, very good call, another Joe. These Joes are forces to be reckoned with. So that's it for Tall Tales today. I'll come back to Joe St. Augustine and Carlo Branch tomorrow.